Hi, welcome back to the channel, Michelle, and today I want to talk about consistency in homeschooling. So I've been, like a lot of you, watching the mid-year update videos, and I've started to notice that it's not really trendy to use the curriculum you picked out. I think the narrative in the homeschooling community, at least online, is that if something's not working, change it. If your schedule's not working, change it up. And that's great. I think that works for some people, but I am not the fly by the seat of your pants person. I never have been. I'm a planner through and through, and I am consistent with both my schedule and my curriculum. If you watch any of my videos, I always feel weird making my update videos because it's like, hey, we're using the same stuff I said we were going to use, and it's going well. So it's always weird when I make those videos because I'm like, what do I talk about? There's nothing new. Everything's working great. But I think consistency is important in homeschooling, and it's important in my homeschooling. And again, homeschooling is different for every family, and also different from every child. But if you're anything like me, you've noticed kind of like that's not being shown on YouTube. It's a lot of the same stuff being talked about, same people doing the same things, and the trends of certain curriculums popping up, and suddenly everybody's using it and forgetting about the plan they made. So I wanted to talk about why consistency is important to me and the benefit it's had in my homeschooling. Again, this is my experience with it. So the first thing that being consistent with my curriculum has really helped is with money. So I will link up above. I just shared my mid-year budget update, but we are a single income family. That is by choice. But we don't have a ton of money to spend on curriculum. And I don't do any type of affiliate work or sponsorships to get free curriculum. That's just not who I am as a person. Any ad revenue earned from this channel actually goes to charitable donations. Again, that's what I feel comfortable with my channel, but I'm not going to try to score free curriculum. That's just not who I am. So I have to be very intentional about the curriculum I choose. I really have to research it and think about how it's going to work with how my kids learn, how I teach, make those important decisions before I purchase the curriculum. Because when my money is spent, it's spent. There's no magical extra money. I don't have like a separate account for homeschooling. You can watch that budget video. I try to take it out throughout our budget as needed and kind of make a plan for that. Really has helped. As you can see in that budget video, this is our third year of homeschooling. Every year I've gotten a little better with our budget, and although prices are overall increasing on some of the curriculum we're using, since my oldest is in 5th grade, looking to middle school next year, some of the things are getting a bit pricey, but we're able to keep the budget lower because I'm being more intentional about those things. Because again, I'm choosing the curriculum, especially if I'm buying a really expensive curriculum. I think IEW is the most expensive curriculum we buy, and that's almost $200. That's a lot of money to spend. And I know that's not a lot of money for everybody to spend, but for my budget, that's a week's worth of groceries. That's important and on one curriculum. I want to be very intentional about it. And so when I buy something, it's not, I'm gonna use it because I bought it. It's because I did the research. I was realistic on how I teach, how my children teach, that I could implement it and know it was going to work. Does that mean we never make changes? No. But if changes are needed, I kind of look at the reasons that those changes are needed. I don't just switch it up because this child is struggling with it. I think there are a lot of reasons for a child to struggle with a curriculum, and I have a whole video about how it's not the curriculum. Sometimes it could be something going on with the child, it could be developmentally, they're learning, they're growing, things are changing, or this is just an area where it's harder for them. And here's the thing about homeschooling, it's okay if it's harder. I think a lot of people get pushback and are like, oh no, my kid doesn't like it, they're not having fun, that means something wrong. No, just because your child isn't excited about it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong and your curriculum isn't working. Again, not a popular opinion on YouTube, but that is my opinion. So this has really helped my budget be consistent and use the curriculum we have. Next one is one important thing about being consistent with the curriculum we use is my kids don't have educational gaps. And this is a big one. So my oldest daughter was in public school, K through 2nd grade. And every single year that she was in public school, they changed the math curriculum. And I know because I'm very involved in what was going on in the public school, because just because I sent her off didn't mean I didn't care what her education was. But every single year they changed it. Every year there were gaps in it. They forgot to explain what a column and a row were in math, and just basic things like that, because when you switch curriculums constantly, you're going to create those gaps. Because a lot of these curriculums have a plan of how they introduce things and usually build upon each other. And I've seen that in a lot of curriculum we've used. Because we're so consistent, we've used core knowledge and Singapore Dimensions math since the beginning. And I can see how that is building upon each other every year. Core knowledge is really big on contextual knowledge. I use that for my youngest daughter for language arts, and then I use the science for all of us. But I can see how it's bringing in different areas and making those connections, because drilling your kids on information isn't going to help them remember. What's going to help them remember long-term memory is being able to connect it to other things, and you're not going to be able to get those connections if you're constantly switching from curriculum to curriculum. There are homeschool YouTubers on here I see who change it every few months. And I think you really need to look at why you're changing curriculum. I'm not saying you should never change curriculum, but what is the reasoning behind? Does it have something to do with how you feel inadequate? Or do you feel not ready to teach it? Do you feel ill-prepared? There are ways to solve those problems without changing curriculums. So for example, my oldest and youngest daughter are extremely different. My oldest is neurotypical. My youngest daughter has ADHD, and her brain works very differently. And there are a curriculum that I can use for both of them. I know a lot of people on here will say, oh, my kid needs this because they're different. I do think there is individualized learning that happens, but here's the thing. You're the teacher, and you should be able to take any curriculum and tailor it to your child. That's part of being the educator, and I think this comes very easily to me because I worked in schools before becoming a parent. I worked in a private school in Chicago, and I was lucky enough to work with really talented, well-educated educators and see how they implemented different techniques in the classroom. And for me, adapting to my children was not difficult at all. And I knew my children really well, and even though my oldest public schooled, we still supplemented at home. So I know their strengths and weaknesses. I know when to push and when to pull back. And that's one of the best parts about being the parent, is you know where that line is, and you know when to push them or when to pull back. But again, this narrative that the online homeschooling community is creating is that, well, if they don't like it, something's wrong. It's no, you're the parent. You know when to push, when to pull back. But we're getting this idea that because they're not having fun, that it's not working out. And that's not the case. There are a million reasons the curriculum could not be working out. Or it could be just, honestly, I've seen this a lot, where it's the parent who gets bored and wants something new. And the shininess of homeschooling wears off. And again, I understand that. I understand the mundaneness of homeschooling, but that's what you signed up for. It's not going to be flash and fun and exciting all the time. That's unrealistic, and to put that expectation on yourself, I think, is also really unfair, to kind of have to bend over backwards to try to create all this magic, when if you just teach, kids will naturally enjoy what you're doing, and sometimes they won't, and that's okay. You don't have to love every single subject. That's okay. Like I said, both my kids, very different, use dimensions, and one strives and does awesome with it. One has more of a struggle with, but doesn't mean she can't do it. Doesn't mean we have to change the curriculum and find the next best thing. Because I hate to spoil it for you, there's no perfect curriculum. Stop chasing the next best thing and use what you have. Be intentional. Stop listening to all the voices telling you to do this, and really look at yourself and your child and make intentional choices, not what's just trendy. And same all about reading. Again, kids are polar opposite. My oldest excels in language arts. My youngest daughter struggles with it. But we can still use that program for both kids, because I, as the teacher, can adapt that. I can adapt to what they need. One will go faster and get through the curriculum and works perfectly. The other one, I need to change things up or how I do it. That's the point of being the educator. Stop relying so heavily on your curriculum. I know a lot of people don't like core knowledge because the teacher guides are intensive. which I think is funny because I don't think they're intensive. It just requires you to read, which, hello, you're a homeschooler, you're gonna have to read. You might have to actually know what you're teaching, not just verbatim, this is what you do. There's so much hand holding. And I think you really need to be more comfortable with teaching your child. And again, I understand not having a background in a certain area can be difficult. For example, writing, something I definitely felt like is my weakest point. So I looked into resources that can help me with that, and we settled on IEW and the instruction on that. But again, that's worth it to me to pay that higher price because I know it's going to work for my oldest child. But stop this idea that switching is always a positive thing, because you're missing out on key things. You're missing the ability to see how it builds upon itself every year. Don't be so skittish when you get pushback or attitude, because guess what? Your kids aren't going to be perfect little angels all the time. There's going to be times where they just don't want to do things, because guess what? There's times as adults we don't want to do things too. But there's also times where you as the parent need to kind of own up to your responsibility, because when you choose to home educate, it is your responsibility to give your child the best education that is possible for them. And I take this as a very serious responsibility, hence why I do all the research and I make the intentional choices I do, because I don't care if it's homeschool, public, private, whatever is the best educational atmosphere for your child is what you should be doing for them, and that's what I strive for. And I've noticed that since sticking with a lot of the same curriculums for multiple years, my kids have been able to make those connections, and there's no gap issues I've been really able to see that weren't outside my daughter's experience in public school, kind of filling in those gaps. So the next one is being consistent with both your curriculum and your schedule creates less stress for you, and it also helps keep you accountable. So again, a lot of people, we don't have the same schedule from the beginning of the year to the end, although they are very, very similar. The only difference we make in December is we put in some type of holiday or cultural study. This past year we did Santa Claus, and then sometimes the group subjects we do will change slightly, but so I do have a scheduled video you can check out, but our group subjects aren't rotating. Mondays we have history. Monday through Thursday we have history. We use O Freedom. Tuesdays we do geography, and that's just a core knowledge. Again, you can look at my update videos if you want to see specific curriculum. Wednesday is social justice, and Thursday and Friday in science. That's how we keep it throughout the year. Now, the reason we don't have art is because last year we did a full year of art, and we did art in the summer, and I've decided to make art more into the summer schedule. Again, we year round, so it does change, but there's not a lot of change to our schedule. And one, that makes it easy for me for planning and prepping and getting prepared. And two, it's better for my kids. Again, my kids are very different. My oldest and my youngest daughter are very different learners, but they both really benefit from a routine and a schedule that doesn't change. I know there's a lot of people that can do it by the seat of their pants. I can't, and my kids don't strive in that environment. And routines and knowing what comes next benefits both of them. I know a lot of people, my youngest daughter has ADHD. A lot of people say that, they need constant switch up. And again, this could be different for different children. Just because you have a diagnosis does not mean you fit into a box. But especially for her, and going through her ADHD workbook and learning more personally about it, she benefits greatly from routine and consistency. So her brain has an easier time transitioning because it knows what to expect. And using the same curriculum is the same thing. She knows what is going to be expected of her when we sit down to do language arts. She knows what type of effort she's going to have to be put into it. I'm not putting new things in front of her all the time. That's going to disrupt that flow and honestly, I think lead to some more anxious behavior because she doesn't know what's coming next. So the schedule makes it easier for me. I don't have to worry about not being prepared. It makes me accountable because there isn't a lot of accountability in homeschooling, at least in the state I live. You don't have portfolios, you don't have testing, you have nothing. You could literally be teaching your children nothing and nobody cares. And I think that's an issue, but there's little accountability. But this keeps me accountable. This makes sure that I'm getting the science supplies ready ahead of time so we don't miss a lesson. Is it the end of the world if you skip a lesson? No, but what happens if you skip a lesson and then you skip another one, and before you know it, you dropped it completely because you got out of the habit of doing it? So many times I hear that on update videos that they just got out of the habit to do it. Again, this is your responsibility. This is your child's education. This is work for you. Another thing that is so common in the narrative of homeschooling online is that it's not work. It's easy, it's delightful, we all have fun. It's work. You're gonna have to put the effort and work into it, and by having a consistent schedule, it really makes it less work for you in the long run. Another one is your kids, and I kind of touched on this, knows what to expect. My oldest daughter has become very independent in 5th grade year. The only thing she really needs me for, besides checking over her work, is math. We do math together. Other than that, she goes off and does her language arts by herself. She has accountability to herself. She's very independent, and she's able to do that because our schedule is so consistent. She knows what her responsibilities are. A lot of people ask me if I have a planner or anything for her. At this stage of life, I don't need one for her because she is so used to routine. And again, she's very like me, type A, that she knows what's expected of her. She knows what she needs to do. And I think one of the reasons I don't get a lot of pushback, now I'm not saying I don't, I mean, I have a preteen, I'm gonna get some pushback, but the reason I don't get a lot of that attitude normally is because my kids know what's expected of them. They know what's expected of me. They have a schedule, everything's in plan, and of course things happen. You know, life changes, sickness happens, big life changes happen. I totally understand that. That's a different issue. I'm talking about your everyday mundane life. I'm talking about the day-to-day. I don't get a lot of fighting from my kids, or I rarely get tears or anything like that from my kids because they know this is what comes next. There's a lot of freedom in consistency, which I don't think a lot of people view it that way. They say, oh, bogged down by a schedule or bogged down by a curriculum. But there's a lot of freedom because you know what to do, especially when, as an educator, going through curriculums multiple times, you know, core knowledge, I can zip through that super quick just because I am so used to it. I'm used to consistency. I know the outline. I know how to pick out the information I need. I don't have to verbatim read every single line. But that comes with consistency. And my kids have greatly benefited from that, and even working in private schools before having kids, the consistency was also really important because kids, I'm not going to say all kids because there are some that I assume don't thrive on consistency, but in my experience it's been very beneficial for kids and parents, and I think it's avoided in this community because it can be boring, and heaven forbid homeschool be boring. So, which leads me into my last one, which is, but isn't it boring doing the same curriculum, having the same schedule? And I already touched about this, that homeschooling is work. You're gonna have to put time and effort in for it, especially as your kids get older. You know, you see a lot of homeschoolers with the younger kids, the elementary level, where it's a lot of activities and fun and different things like that. As your kids get older, that's going to change. Their workload, no matter what you do, is going to increase. The amount of homeschooling you're going to be doing is going to increase time-wise. Hopefully they get more independent and you become more of a passenger on their education journey than the main driving force. But it's going to be work, and I think teaching them that even in the elementary years that, okay, this is your responsibility, this is your schedule, this is your curriculum, these are your expectations, and showing that by doing your work. So I don't come to the homeschooling work area with my kids and get unprepared. I don't say, oh, well, mom forgot to buy this thing from the store, do our science experiment, so we're gonna skip it. No, I'm showing them to be accountable to themselves. I'm bringing my best self to the table, so they bring their best self. And it really is a good relationship and respectful relationship to have. And I'm not concerned if it's boring. Like I said, if you, the educator, can make it adaptable, you can take any lesson, any curriculum, and really adapt it to what your child needs by simple tweaks. You don't need to buy a brand new curriculum for every single child. And yes, children are very different. I do think you should adjust based on each of your children, but I'm able to use curriculum passed down from my oldest to my youngest because I'm able to be adaptable. That's part of being an educator, taking your experience teaching and being able to apply that to multiple different kids. Because I'll tell you, I'm sure public school and private school teachers get bored teaching the same things, especially if you're a 30-year veteran teacher, but they find ways to make it more naturally appealing. Or I saw this in public school setting with my oldest. My oldest daughter was very ahead of her peers when it came to reading and language arts. So the teacher put her aside and gave her separate assignments and different activities to do because she recognized that she was at a different level than her peers. That's a good teacher. It's not, I need a different curriculum necessarily. It's how can I adjust what I have to better meet the needs of my child. And that's going to mean work on your end, whether that's figuring out how best your child learns or figuring out what curriculum works best. Stop looking at the shiny things, stop looking at the influencers, and that means me as well. Stop being so influenced by everyone else, because homeschooling is ultimately between you and your child. Not social media, not Instagram, not all the pretty pictures. It's a relationship between you and your child, and what's best is something you will only know. So that is the reasons that consistency, both in scheduling and curriculum, has really benefited my children. If you have any specific questions about anything I talked about, leave in the comments below. If not, thank you for watching.